Well, you'd be hard-pressed to find many Canadians opposed to stopping charities funding terrorism. But what about environmental charities working on anti-pipeline campaigns? Well, in the federal budget last week, Finance Minister Jim Flaherty said Ottawa would, quote, zero in on some groups with questionable activities. And one of the people concerned about a possible campaign against these charities is Harvey McKinnon, a fundraising consultant. Harvey, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks, Jill.
You have helped raise hundreds of millions of dollars for nonprofits. First of all, just tell us, how difficult is it to raise money for these charities?
Well, it's always difficult to raise money for charities, but I think when you have a mission that is properly conveyed to the public, they will give you money. Cancer causes, environmental organizations, international development agencies raise up to $9 billion a year in Canada.
And explain for us, if you will, when we're talking about these environmental charities, there are some rules about how much money they are allowed to spend on education, are there not?
Right. Well, I think the rule that the Tories seem to be concerned about are organizations are allowed to spend 10% on advocacy work. Now, how they define advocacy work is different than the organizations that are being questioned may define it. But essentially, what's happening is the government is trying to intimidate environmental organizations, is trying to intimidate any kind of social justice organization and many other organizations that disagree with their policies and their direction.
So you're suggesting that they are sending the Canada Revenue Agency after these agencies to put some fear into them?
Absolutely. Statistically, 1 in 100 charities is investigated each year or audited just to make sure that they're following the laws. This government has gone after 7 of the top 12 charities this year, currently going after them. Statistically, we have a statistician, doctor in statistics on our staff. He said it's like a 1 in a billion chance that that would happen independently. So it's clearly they're targeting them. We know I've talked to other people in other environmental organizations that have not been audited, and they said there's a total chill there. People are afraid, and it's not just in the environmental sector, it's in a number of other sectors as well.
So of the audits that have been done on some companies, did any of them lose their charitable status after the CRA was done with them?
No organization has been identified as having lost it, even though some of the investigations have been going on for years. Jim Flaherty, a couple of years ago in the budget in 2012, allocated $8 million of our taxpayer dollars to investigate nonprofits, and no one has lost their tax status. But the key thing is it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. Despite what the government says they're interested in saving tax dollars, they're clearly not. They've got a political agenda, and they're going after charitable organizations that have a legitimate role to play in our society, talking about social issues of which they're experts in.
Mm-hmm. Now, how does fear of losing charitable status affect these charities? Well,
for the most part, many organizations will not be able to get foundation money. They won't be able to get major gifts because people get a tax credit if they give $10,000 or $100,000 at these charities, and they will lose that ability to give them a tax receipt. So they will raise much less money.
So that makes it very difficult then for them to carry out their work.
Absolutely. And the key thing, I think, just even around the advocacy, there's not an environmental or other organization in the country that I know of that's being political, as the federal government says, by advocating people vote for any particular party. All they're doing is talking about the issues that they are experts on. If we didn't have Mothers Against Drunk Drivers talking about and advocating for drunk driving laws, we wouldn't have them. It's the same thing with the cancer and lung societies. If we didn't have them talking about smoking and the dangers of secondhand smoke, we'd still have smoking on planes and in schools.
Mm-hmm. Is this something really specific to the Harper government, do you think?
Absolutely. If you look at Canadian history, this is the first time there's ever been a concerted, directed attack at Canadian charities. Under all the other liberal and conservative governments in history, I've never seen anything like this, and I have been working with charities for over 35 years. The other thing is that in previous conservative governments, there were tons of people with integrity. David McDonald, Joe Clark, Bob Stanfield, Flora McDonald, that did a lot of work with charities. That's gone right now.
So do you think this is just really rooted, well, actually, what do you think this is really rooted in?
I think it's rooted in them not wanting to have any opposition to their anti-environmental policies. They want the tar sands to be developed at a rapid rate. That's a debatable issue, but the key thing is you have to allow people who have science on their side to talk about some of the concerns that they have. The corporations that are billion-dollar corporations, They're running ads all the time on TV and radio and newspapers talking about how great this is for Canada, and yet the Harper government is trying to shut down anybody that has way less money talking about this issue.
Although there are some allegations that some of these charities are getting lots of money from American foundations in an effort to stymie the Harper government's efforts with oil sands here to bolster the American oil industry.
Well, that's a bogus argument. Basically, I used to sit on the advisory board of an American foundation, an environmental foundation, that gave money to Canada and to the U.S. And the reason we did that is because we cared about environmental issues. A lot of it went just to protect habitat. Other things went to support campaigns, but under that 10% allocation. The climate doesn't stop at our border. Air pollution, water pollution does not stop at the border. Many of these Americans are incredibly generous, sending their money to help protect pristine areas in Canada that are under threat. And a lot of their money help protect the Great Bears rainforest, which the vast majority of Canadians think is a good thing.
I did read an article today that suggested this is all just noise, that this can be all explained by, statistics and the way Canada Revenue Agency audits all sorts of industries. What do you say to people who are absolutely not buying this argument that these environmental agencies or charities are under attack?
Well, statistically, there's 86,000 charities in Canada. Roughly around 1 in 100 is audited each year. The chances of half the major environmental organizations being audited in 1 year is 1 out of 100 times 1 out of 100, that's 1 out of 10,000, and then you just go on, and it's 1 in a billion or more that this would happen by chance. And the Harper government is also going after other organizations. They've gone after international development agencies. They took away Kairos and ecumenical church groups' tax status a couple of years ago. They took away a human rights organization in Quebec for sending letters to foreign powers who were torturing their citizens. It's an ideological program that they are trying to chill the charitable sector and stop any opposition to their programs. And
then what about the connection with scientists? Because we have seen scientists speaking out about the Harper government really wreaking havoc on the work they do and their ability to tell us about it.
Well, it's appalling for somebody who believes in a democratic society like me and you and probably every one of your viewers that a government would muzzle scientists that are experts at certain areas that provide facts. So if they have evidence that show fish farms are dangerous, we should be allowed as the public to know about that. If they have evidence that the tar sands are devastating around climate change, we should be allowed to know that. And the Harper government is making sure that people are terrified if you're a scientist. Now, if I was a scientist in Ottawa and I had a couple of kids and a mortgage to pay, I would keep silent because I've been told to keep silent. That's what they're doing to people. It's pure intimidation.
It certainly doesn't sound like democracy.
It's definitely not democracy.
All right, Harvey McKinnon, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Jill.